The other woman called me on a Tuesday morning in October. The leaves hadn't even turned yet. That's what I remember most. The maple outside my kitchen window was still green, and she was on my phone asking if I had a few minutes to talk. Not crying, not angry, just tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from one bad night, the kind that comes from years of believing something that was never going to be true. I made another cup of coffee before I sat down. That's how you know it's going to be one of those conversations, when you pour something warm just to have something to hold on to. Maybe you know that feeling. The phone rings and something in your chest, something old and quiet, tells you to let it go to voicemail. But you answer anyway, because that's what you do. You answer. You've always answered, even when part of you already knows what's on the other end. My husband's name was Richard, is Richard. I still don't know which tints to use, and it's been 3 years. We met in 1974. He had a mustache he was very proud of, and a car that broke down every other Thursday. I was 22, and I thought love was supposed to feel like a rescue, like someone showing up just before you went under. He showed up. We built a life in a small house on Elm Street, raised 2 girls, had a dog named Barney who stole sandwiches off the counter. Ordinary things. The kind of ordinary you don't photograph because you think it will always be there. The coffee pot on at 6:15 every morning. The sound of the garage door opening at 5:47. His reading glasses on the nightstand, always on the left side. I thought I knew the shape of my life, the way you know the floor plan of your own house in the dark, where the stairs are, where the door frame meets the wall, where you'll bump your hip if you're not paying attention. But here's something I've learned. Sometimes you're not in the dark because there's no light. Sometimes you're in the dark because the person beside you decided long ago that you didn't need to see what they were doing. It wasn't a letter. It wasn't a lipstick stain on a collar. It wasn't any of the things they show you in movies. It was a receipt. A gas station receipt from a town I'd never heard of, Pine Grove, population 2,100. It fell out of his jacket pocket when I was looking for a tissue. I almost threw it away. I almost didn't look at the date, but I did. Thursday, March 14th, 8:47 p.m. He'd told me he was working late. I didn't confront him that night. I made meatloaf instead, mashed potatoes, the green beans he liked with the little bits of bacon. I watched him eat, and I watched him tell me about his day, and I watched him kiss my forehead before he went to watch the news. And I thought, you are so good at this. Not the lying, the living. The way he moved through our house like a man with nothing to hide. Like he hadn't bought gas 100 miles away on a Thursday night in March. Like I wasn't sitting across from him, holding a secret he didn't know I had. That's the part that still gets me, not the betrayal, the comfort of it, the ease, the way he could look me in the eyes and mean nothing. I started noticing things after that, not looking for them, just not looking away anymore. The way he'd take his phone into the garage, not because the signal was better, because the door had a lock. The way he'd mention a client dinner, but never say the client's name. The way he'd come home sometimes and shower before dinner, not after work, before dinner. Like he was washing something off before he sat at my table. I told myself I was being paranoid, I told myself every woman my age gets suspicious. We've been burned before. We see smoke everywhere. But here's the truth I didn't want to touch. I wasn't seeing smoke. I was standing in the middle of a fire, telling myself it was just a warm kitchen. The worst part isn't what he did. The worst part is what I stopped asking for. I stopped asking him to look at me when I talked. I stopped reaching for his hand in the car. I stopped saying I love you first, just so I could hear whether he meant it when he said it back. I stopped taking up space, not because he asked me to. He never had to ask. I did it myself, quietly. The way you rearrange furniture around a leak in the ceiling. You don't fix the ceiling. You just stop putting anything important underneath it. I shrank. Not all at once. You never do it all at once. You'd notice. It happens in millimeters, in small surrenders, in the things you stop asking for because it hurts less than hearing no. And one day you look in the mirror and you don't recognize the size of yourself. You've made yourself so small, so easy to overlook, so convenient. And somewhere, somehow, you start to think that is who you are. It isn't, but we'll get to that. The call came on a Tuesday, like I said. Her name was Margaret. She was 53. She had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and she had been with Richard for 20 years. 20 years. I want you to sit with that number. Don't let it pass you by. My girls were 3 and 5 when it started. I was 37 years old. I had a minivan and a perm and library books on my nightstand that I never finished because I was too tired to stay awake past 9. While I was putting my daughters to bed and reading them stories about brave little animals who find their way home, he was building another home, another life. Christmases, birthdays, school plays. A woman who waited for him on weekends and believed him when he said, "Next year. Just give me a little more time. Next year I'll leave." For 20 years she waited. For 20 years he let her. I didn't hate her. That surprised me most of all. I sat there with my coffee going cold, and I listened to this woman describe my husband, and all I felt was a deep, bone-tired recognition. Because she wasn't describing a monster. She wasn't describing a stranger. She described his laugh, the way he crinkled his eyes, the way he'd sing off-key in the car, just a little too loud, like he wanted you to hear him enjoying himself. She described my husband. And I thought, I don't know who that man is. Not because she had a different version of him, but because I realized I had spent 35 years loving the shape of a man without ever asking what was underneath it. I loved his routine, his presence, the way he fit into the life we built together, like he'd been placed there by someone who knew what they were doing. But who was he? I didn't know. I knew the version of him that came home to me, and that version was a performance he'd been giving for decades. A very good one, the kind where the actor forgets he's acting. I confronted him that night. I waited until the news was over. I turned off the television. I sat across from him in the same chairs we'd sat in for 30 years, and I said, "Who is Margaret?" He cried. And here is what I want you to understand about those tears, because this matters. He didn't cry the way you cry when you're sorry. He didn't cry for what he'd done to me, or to Margaret, or to our daughters, or to the 20 years she spent waiting in a house he'd half built and never finished. He cried the way you cry when you're caught, when the thing you've been running from finally grabs you by the shoulder and turns you around and makes you look at it. He cried, and he said he loved me. He said he'd always loved me. He said Margaret didn't mean anything. And I sat very still. And I thought about a woman named Margaret who had loved a man for 20 years, who had given him her 30s and her 40s and her 50s, who had waited year after year for a promise he never intended to keep. And I thought, if she didn't mean anything, why did she get 20 years? You don't give 20 years to nothing. You give 20 years to something you can't let go of. He just didn't have the courage to choose. So instead of choosing, he let two women believe they were chosen, and he called that love. The divorce was quiet. We'd been married too long to make a scene. The girls were grown. The house was paid off. There wasn't much to fight over except the memories, and you can't put those on a spreadsheet. I kept the house. He kept the car. Margaret kept him. And I kept myself. That was the part I hadn't expected, the part nobody tells you about. I expected grief. I got some. 6 months of hollow mornings, of walking into rooms and forgetting why I'd come, of sitting in the backyard watching the seasons change and feeling like I was watching them from behind glass. But then, one morning I woke up and I didn't reach for his side of the bed. It was the smallest thing, the tiniest, most ordinary thing, but I felt it in my whole body, like I had been holding a fist closed for 20 years, so tight for so long that I'd forgotten it was closed, and finally, quietly, my hand had let go. I wasn't waiting anymore. I hadn't even known I was waiting, but I was, always waiting for him to see me, really see me, to come home and mean it, to choose me not as a habit, but as a decision he made every single day. He never did. And now there was nothing left to wait for. And that was the most peaceful I had felt in 20 years. I'm 78 now. My life is quieter than it's ever been. My daughters call on Sundays. I go to bingo on Thursdays, even though I never win. I sit with my coffee in the morning, and I watch the light come through the kitchen window, and I think, this is mine. Not half of something, not the part he left for me, not the shape I made myself to fit inside. Mine. I don't know what happened to Richard. I don't ask. I hope he found something real. I hope Margaret did too. I hope the life they built from all that waiting was worth what it cost. But that's not my story anymore. My story is the woman who answered the phone on a Tuesday morning in October. My story is the woman who finally stopped making herself small. And if you're watching this, sitting in your kitchen or your living room or your car in the parking lot where you go to have 5 minutes alone so you can breathe, I want you to hear this clearly. You are not small. You never were. You were just standing next to someone who needed you to be. And the moment you stop believing them is the moment you start coming back to yourself. That moment is allowed to be today. You don't have to wait for the phone to ring. You don't have to wait for someone else's confession to give you permission. You are already allowed. You were always allowed. The kettle's whistling. Go pour yourself something warm, and this time, do it for you.